Welcome, everyone. We are live. Let me just remove this banner right here. So thank you, everyone, for joining us. My name is Pedro Gomes. I'm a professional triathlete here in Scottsdale, Arizona. I'm here with Jason Lentzke. We are both locals in Arizona. We train and live in Arizona year-round. So I think we are in a good position to give you a few tricks and tips on the course that you'll be facing at Tempe 70.3. We both have social media, and obviously you can follow us on the handles below here on the little screen. We're going to go over the courses, but above all, we're going to share a few tricks that will probably help you on race day, not just having a good race, but not be surprised by some of the events that happen in Tempe. I'll go straight into it, and then I'll pass the ball to Jason because he's been just quiet, drinking coffee. One of the things that I'll start with is mostly race week. Race week is important to, above all, not overdo anything in training. Obviously, you want to be prepared to perform well during the weekend. But there's always a fine line between not overdoing and underdoing it training as well. Both myself and Jason do have a lot of athletes racing, and we both go about the same way, and we try to prescribe a taper that includes some openers and some rest, because that's really the only way you have to perform well. And I think above all, it's important to prioritize sleep, hydration, mostly because that's the way that you're going to perform at your best on race day. And it's fairly easy to get overwhelmed with race expos and getting hyper excited about the event and just trying to stay off your feet and rest in your hotel room if you're out of town, or in your house if you're a local. It's important. And before I pass the ball on to Jason, one of the things that I always tell everyone is to charge their Di2 and their Garmin's and head units. Make sure the power meter has a new battery on race week, because we tend to forget about those things, especially the Di2, because we go so long without charging it that we forget it needs to be charged. Passing on to the ball to Jason, because I've already talked too much. So Jason, anything you want to add on, and please introduce yourself. Go ahead.
Thanks, Pedro. Like Pedro said, my name is Jason Lentzke. I live here in Phoenix and coach out of Toro Performance. We're fortunate to have this be our local race. Last year, Pedro and I actually both raced this. We were, I think, one of the few who got to race an Ironman 70.3. So it's fresh in our memories. And it's a really exciting venue. It doesn't quite have the storied tradition of the full distance, but it's certainly gaining steam. With that, let's get into the most exciting part of race week: parking. So, if you're staying at a hotel, chances are you can probably walk. Ideally, if you're staying in Tempe, it's a pretty walkable downtown area to the race venue. If you're traveling, or if you stayed at a rental house, maybe 15 or 20 minutes out of the area, target the parking structure off Rio Salado and Mill. If you get there as early as most Type A triathletes, I'm just as guilty of it. There'll be plenty of parking in that parking garage. And for spectators, I would head a little bit north, just so athletes have more room to the underneath the 202. You can also, I've parked, if you get there a little bit later, for spectators, maybe after the race has begun, You can park on the southwest side. There's a lot of side streets near some of the bars and restaurants. That's a decent walk. Yeah, that's pretty much it on parking. Sorry, that's the most boring part of this talk, we promise. With that, we're going to get right into the swim.
Okay, you want me to go?
Please proceed.
Okay, so sorry, this is not the best way to show the swim course, but this is what we have. The swim course is pretty straightforward. It's you can't really see, but on the left side of the screen, you can see the little green box right there. Let me see. No, it's this way. Right there. This is where you start. The difficulty of the course is actually the sun, because the sun will come out from where Jason, on the side where Jason is. So let's imagine Jason is actually the sun here. And you'll have the sun in your face for the vast majority of the swim course. This is added challenge because the buoys are yellow. I don't know how they haven't come up with a color that's more visible with when the sun is in your face, but the truth is the buoys will be yellow and it'll be hard to see. The biggest trick I can share here is that you need tinted goggles, most likely, because it's really hard to see with the sun in your face. Tinted goggles do help. And don't swimming on someone's feet is always faster than swimming by yourself. But don't trust the person in front of you to guide you, because he or she may not even be going the right direction. There's a few pillars on the bridges that you can aim for, but overall it's a really tough course to sight. And I think one of the main questions is it going to be a wetsuit swim or not? And right now the water temperature was 77 today. The cutoff is 76. Here in Arizona has been quite chilly in the morning for the past few mornings. So it's very likely that WTC finds a spot that's actually 76, and it's going to be a wetsuit legal swim. But just be prepared that it may not be a wetsuit legal swim, but it has always been a wetsuit swim as far as I remember. Jason, anything you want to add, namely running into transition and so on? Please go ahead.
No, we can just touch on the start protocol. They should be using the same protocol that we used last year, in that it'll be self-seated and they'll just go off 2 at a time, probably in 10-second increments. So, if you want to be, or if you see yourself swimming fast, get out of transition as early as you can in the morning and make your way to the front of the swim corral, because once that gun goes off, that's it. So, if you're racing towards the front of the race and you really want to know where you are within the race, it's probably best to just get to the front of that corral. And then the last bit of the swim course is kind of tricky. So if you look on the map, on that final right-hand turn, you go west, and then you have a really quick left-hand turn. It's really easy to just try to swim straight to that finish line. There'll probably be quite a few kayaks to prevent people from doing it, but at that point, you're just going to want to be ready to get out of the water. So make sure you kind of maintain your composure and follow the buoys, not somebody in front of you who's maybe taking a bad line. And then, keep swimming until your hands touch the concrete ramp. There's no need to stand up before. Keep swimming until your hands touch the concrete ramp, and then stand up. And you've got a pretty long transition. So it's entirely personal preference if you want to strip your wetsuit off when you exit, or do it when you get to your bicycle in transition, but there will not be wetsuit strippers. But yeah, Pedro, what's your go-to? Do you take your wetsuit off right away and run kind of clean, or do you like to?
That's a good question. It's, as you mentioned, it's a very long run to transition. As you run to transition, the wetsuit tends to dry out, which will make the wetsuit harder to come off if it is indeed a wetsuit swim. So I personally like to take the wetsuit as soon as possible. So what I would do is, as you mentioned, touch the ramp, stand up, start running, start stripping. And as soon as I get to a point of the stripping phase as I run, that I have the wetsuit on my waist, I basically just stop for 10 seconds, remove the wetsuit, grab it, and run the rest without the wetsuit. Also taking in mind that running with a wetsuit puts a lot of strain into your quads, because there's a lot of resistance on the wetsuit. Running fast with a wetsuit is not an easy task. So you may want to consider either taking off the wetsuit as soon as you get it in a position where you can just stop for a few seconds and take it out, or just don't rush into transition. It's a very long transition, or run to transition. As you get into transition, don't forget to memorize where you place the bike. Usually the races in Tempe, they don't have a lot of references because the Tempe Town Lake or Tempe Town Lake Park or Tempe Town Park doesn't have a lot of things to reference to where your bike is. I usually use trees. I usually use lighting poles to try to spot where my bike is in relation to that sighting landmark. Tempe doesn't have a lot of those, so just keep in mind that you don't want to forget where your bike is racked, because it's going to be a very big transition area, and you may lose 5-10 minutes just trying to seek for your bike. If you don't have anything to add, we move on to the bike course. Jason, you good?
I just have to add that you don't have to lie. We know you use a big red balloon inflated to find your bike, but sure. We've got some questions on our Facebook page, and thanks for those. We're going to answer all our questions at the end, and we'll just go back to the Facebook page. So keep the questions coming, and we'll hit those when we wrap up our last topic.
Right.
So with that,
of course,
we're going to get into the bike. So obviously 90K or 56 miles. The most challenging aspect of this course is the shape and the amount of loops. We've got 3 loops, not a particularly hilly course. I think on the Ironman website, it's branded as 2,200 feet of vertical gain, but I don't think it's that much. I think it's closer to 15, maybe 1,600. I wouldn't call it a hilly course at all. That being said, it certainly has its own unique challenges in that you've got a lot of dead turns. If you look at the map Pedro has posted on the screen, you can see all the what we call dead turns or U-turns. So a lot of opportunity to lose speed and watch your watts go to 0, and then you're going to be so tempted to just surge back up to your target power. So let's rewind a bit. You've mounted your bike, you're leaving T1, and you're going to make that right-hand turn and then a left on Rio Salado, and that is your opportunity to really calm your heart rate down. You don't have to start pounding the fluids just yet. Let that heart rate come down a bit, make that right-hand turn, and just slowly settle into the groove. If there's already congestion on lap 1 for you, that's fine. It's just your opportunity to practice. You know, you're going to have to be very vocal on this course, and that it's going to get busy, particularly on laps 2 and 3. So ease into it the first bit, maybe the first 10 minutes. Find your target heart rate, or if you're training with power, your target power, and just settle in. If you're racing or pacing by power, this is a type of course, obviously, where, it's not a Texas 70.3 where you just keep it in one gear for 56 miles. You're going to be shifting constantly. And because of that, I would really focus on your normalized power for this race. If you try to focus on average power, you're just going to get frustrated because it's going to be fluctuating constantly. So it's really a course where you're going to monitor your heart rate and normalize power and just pace yourself, because if you smoke the corners, and I say that, I mean coming out of the corners too hot and accelerating too fast to just get up to speed, by the time you hit, 40 miles, your quads are really going to be feeling the effects of you could say burning those matches or just those surges at threshold. So try not to surge out of the corners. Be very patient. And it's going to be warm. I think the high, what did you say, Pedro? It's going to be 86 for a high?
86 for the day. No, 87 is what the forecast is looking for.
Okay.
So, yeah.
So that'll be a gradual rise in heat. But here in the desert, it's very dry. So you really don't realize how much you're sweating until, potentially it's too late if you're not hydrating well. So really pump the fluids in that. In this particular weather, you won't need much water. Just keep the sports drink coming in. Use water to kind of clean your mouth or clean your body off, get the salt off. But at least one bottle of a sports drink is a general rule of thumb. 1 bottle per hour is probably the bare bones minimum. Of course, you've got that all dialed in by now anyway. But for maybe the first timers out there, that's really the bare bones minimum. You're going to have plenty of aid stations on this course, just given the scope that it's 3 loops. In that, you're also going to have plenty of opportunities to have access to a mechanic if you do have a mechanical or a puncture, but don't rely on them. Make sure you have what you need. But the beautiful thing of 3 loops for 56 miles is you won't have to wait that long if something does happen. What am I missing, Pedro?
Nothing. You touched most of the points that I wanted also to touch. 3 loops. There's 23 turns on the loop. There's a few dead turns where you go pretty much to 0 miles per hour and try to not spike power out of those corners. Is extremely important. Even if you don't use power, just think of the torque you're putting on the pedals. Just don't put a lot more torque into the pedals than you would, or stay within the target that you feel like it is your target for the race. If you're using heart rate, your heart rate is not going to spike in just 5-10 seconds. So by the time it spikes, it's probably you just already overdid it. There's 2 main turns that I want people to be aware that they are very, very tight. One is actually the closest to me right here, coming off Rio Salado into Priest. That's a very tight corner because Rio Salado is very wide. You have 2 lanes, and then you go into Priest where you basically have half a lane of cones, and it's super tight. I've seen people going off the road, and you have people coming the opposite direction. I've seen people go into the opposite direction cones, and it's a very, very sketchy turn. Every other turn is fairly open. The second turn that I would be worried would be the one on College. Is basically, when you look at the map, is the one that's more towards the top. Just because it's very tight. It's basically 1 lane of car traffic separated with cones in the middle, and you have to U-turn at the top. So it's the only like 2 points where it is a little sketchy. But as Jason mentioned, you have to be very vocal on this course because it's going to be very busy on second and third loops specifically. So just keep screaming on your left because people will be all over the place. There's really no way to go. The road is just not very wide. So those are the two corners that I want to call out specifically. Also, I think Jason already referred, but temperature is going to slowly rise throughout the day. The problem with temperature, the dry environment we have here in Arizona is that you don't start to sweat immediately. So your brain doesn't have that trigger to start drinking. So it's important to start drinking right as you get on the bike, because stress level will be low. It's still relatively chilled when you get on the bike. So start drinking, because you do have a lot more in your budget to digest fluids. And if you only start drinking by the time you start sweating, it's going to probably be too late. So start drinking right off when you get on the bike. Just get ahead of the fluids on that first hour, because it will ramp up temperature really fast, and it will you'll get caught by surprise. And I think that's pretty much it. So vocal, humid, spiking power, and I'll go straight into the run if you don't have anything, Jason. You good?
Perfect. Yeah.
Okay. So going into the run course, 2 loops. It's a very unshaded course, so you don't have shade anywhere on this course. That means that if it's 88 and blazing sun, it will feel a lot hotter than it actually is. For some reason, run splits on this course have never been particularly fast. I can't really explain why. I think it's just because it becomes a very draining course in terms of environment, because it does become a little hot. It's mostly flat. The only hills that per se would be going over to Scottsdale road from the bike path, or from Tempe bike path, which is not a particularly big hill. And I think there's really no way of getting lost in this course. It may sound confusing, but it's not. Especially the first few miles, it's not very confusing. But there's a trick that I tell everyone that really plays out on these races. When you come off the bike, getting back into transition again, don't forget where you wrecked, because it's a big transition area, and you don't want to be losing 5-10 minutes losing for your spot, and you don't have your bike anymore there. So just remember that you need to spot your shoes, not so much your bike. Probably one of the questions is there going to be transition bags? I don't think so. I think it's going to be a traditional triathlon. You have everything set up by your bike. So your shoes will be out. The transition tends to be very tight. There's not a lot of space between participants. I know we're living on an area where we actually should try to keep our distance, but don't expect the transition to have a lot of space in between athletes. So coming into the transition from the bike, and getting off on the first mile of the run, I usually tell people just relax on that first mile, because you're coming off a situation where you have a lot of windshield from the bike into a situation where it's a lot more stress, because the run is a sport that implies a lot more stress, and you're not having the cooling effect from the wind. So it's very, very easy to overpace and overheat on that first mile. So try to relax on that first mile. Try to settle down your heart rate, because it will be off the roof. So try to chill on that first mile. This is very, very hard to do, and it takes a lot of discipline to do, and takes a lot of race experience. So those that are first timers, they will probably blast through the first 2-3 miles and blow and go through into a slow death march. So just don't fall into that mistake. And the other advice that I can give is just try to remove heat. Try to stay cool. There's quite a few aid stations. Because of COVID, it's very, very likely that the aid stations are self-served. On the bike, going back a little bit, it's most likely they're going to hand you water bottles so you can grab them, But on the run, what has happened for the past few events with Ironman is that you'll have a table set up with water Gatorade and gels, and you'll have to grab it from the table. I just raced 2 weeks ago Chattanooga, and some of the volunteers on the run course were actually giving you cups. I don't know what's going to be the instruction for this race, but be prepared to having to grab, slowing down a little bit on this aid stations to grab fluid, and above all, use every opportunity you get to stay cool, because as I mentioned, it's unshaded. It's gonna be very hot. I mean, for us in Arizona, 87 doesn't sound very hot. People that come from the north obviously will suffer a little bit more. And with this, I think, as also Jason also mentioned, the forecast shows 87 on race day, so that's hot. So passing on the ball to Jason if he has anything to add.
Sounds good. Yeah, I would just, definitely a course where I would recommend a cap, ideally a white cap. But yeah, like Pedro said, just use every aid station as an opportunity to just reset. Even if you pause for 10 seconds, don't be afraid to stop at the first couple aid stations just to calm the heart rate down. And look, 13 miles is a long way to go. And, I like to have athletes kind of have a mental plan to have your last 5K be as fast or faster than your first 5K. It's really hard to do, and most people don't. But it's just good to have that mindset going in, like, okay, I want my first 5K to be the same pace as my last 5K. So just go into it thinking you want to close well. Everybody can run well for 5K, but you want to run well the last 5K.
Mm-hmm. Some final notes. I think we'll go into the questions in a minute. I think I've been racing for quite a few years. The course is mostly flat. The bike does have some crosswinds at points, mostly on the first few miles, pulling up the bike course. The first few miles, when you go real salado into that little loop, it's usually a little windy. You go over the highway. For some reason, it seems always to be a little windy, but the rest of the course is pretty protected. But as I was mentioning, it's pretty flat, except for maybe there's two small hills on the bike course, which is, for those that know, it's Curry Road and College. Those are the relatively hilly sections, but it's it is a fast course, and people are concerned that with this many turns may turn into a crit course. It's not. It's definitely a course where you do take advantage of your triathlon bike, your TT bike, but just be aware that there's gonna be crowded on third loop, so keep your head up. And as I was saying, I've raced a lot of 70.3s, and it sounds like it's a fast course, but it's a little slower than people think. It's flat, but the turns, the how hot the run is, tend to slow down pace a little bit. And even I don't think the swim, I've never felt like that swim is a fast course. Don't know why. There's no current. The water it's hot. Even if it's 76 with a wetsuit, it can feel a little hot. And I forgot to mention, for those local that live nearby or are in town on Wednesday, Four Peaks Racing does have a splash and dash on Wednesday night or Thursday night. I think it's Wednesday, where you can actually do the part of you can do a 1500 swim and a 5K run. It's far enough from the race where you can actually do the swim and the run and still recover for the race day. But you can also just do the swim if you want to test out the waters. I don't like swimming in Templeton Lake. I avoid it whenever I can. But if you want to test the waters, go ahead and jump onto the lake on Wednesday. And a few things I always forget, or I tend to always forget for race day. Usually the race belt, I always forget for race day. Salt pills, I usually also forget it. I bring a charger for my Di2 with a power bank for just in case the bike, for some reason, the Di2 is discharged overnight, or for some reason something happens. I always bring a headlamp into transition as well, just because the race starts at 6:20. Sun doesn't rise until 6:30. So it can be dark when transition opens, and a headlamp always helps. Bike pump, they usually have it on transition. If you have a bike pump and you can bring it, that's always a nice add-on to your race morning. And bring a jacket, because Arizona this time of the year can be low 50s in the morning and then rises up to I think it'll be like 58. So it's comfortable, but bring a jacket, because that's always something useful to just be worn before transition. And speaking of, I don't know if they're going to allow you to get into a water for a warm-up. I didn't see it on the athlete's guide, and you can't really swim on Templeton Lake every day. So if you're in town trying to get a swim, you're better off using one of the public swimming pools. Scottsdale does have really good, easy access public swimming pools. So you're better off trying to use that than going onto the lake, because you can't really swim unless you participate on the Four Peaks event. Anything you want to add, Jason, other than, and we'll go into the questions next?
Just like Pedro said, bring both your swim skin and your wetsuit. Be prepared for either. I like to make sure having a cheap water bottle and a gel to consume right before the swim start, because you may be hanging in that corral for, I don't know. It depends how late you get in that corral. So if you need to bring a bar or some type of light sandwich to have, like a PBJ, if you're going to be waiting a while, that's not a bad idea. Make sure your Di2 is charged. Pump tires race morning, not the night before. Race belt, like Pedro said. And other than that, whatever you bring for your triathlon, bring that. Ironman does a great job of having spare things, but don't rely on anything to be there for you.
Yep. Okay. So a few questions. Sleeves or sleeveless? It's a particular preference on the wetsuit, obviously. If you just FYI, if it's a non-wetsuit swim, you cannot use core shorts or the buoyancy shorts that all brands have, and you can also not have anything that's fabric below the knee or below the elbow. So you can't really swim with compression sleeves if it's a non-wetsuit swim. On the sleeves versus sleeveless, it's a personal preference. Usually real swimmers, like the sleeveless. Triathletes like the sleeves. I don't know, Jason, what do you like?
Whatever makes me faster. So for me, I like all the flotation I can get. I didn't grow up swimming, so I don't need the extra shoulder mobility that some pure swimmers may need. So I prefer a full sleeve, even if it's just at the cutoff. I just feel faster in a full sleeve.
Okay, boat launch or ramp? It's actually a boat ramp. I don't know exactly.
Ramp.
What's that?
It's a concrete ramp that you kind of walk down and then you can jump off, Marcus. So it's not drastic. You could maybe take 2 steps and then you'll jump to the right to head towards that first buoy. So it's very gradual. It's not a steep drop off.
And same on the exits. It's the same type of ramp.
Exactly.
What is the run? The transition. Oh, the run to transition is a mix of grass and dirt, and there's a little bit of path as well. So if you run a little bit on the grass, I guess the question would be, do you need anything set up when you leave the water? I've never seen anyone have that. Maybe Jason, have you seen anyone have anything set up there?
No, I don't think so. I mean, sometimes at the full in November, the water can be so cold that people complain of numb feet, so they struggle running to their bikes. But I don't think, if you have an issue going into the race, maybe you want to have tennis shoes there. But I don't think I've ever seen someone, Alcatraz style, have a pair of running shoes to go to T1.
Okay. Avoid drafting penalties with so many athletes on the bike course. So many athletes on the bike course, plus motorcycles with marshals. So it is going to be a very tight course. There's really no way of avoiding drafting penalties if you don't have anywhere to go. Obviously, drafting marshals do a good job most of the times not giving out penalties, because if you don't have anywhere to go. But if you try to keep your distance, keep right above all. Just be mindful that there are athletes that are probably faster than you that will pass you. Keep right when possible. Don't ride on the left side, because that's dangerous for everyone. So just be safe above all. Any tips, Jason?
No, just be vocal and, just kind of make your presence be known. And look, follow the rules. You have 30 seconds to pass an athlete for age groupers. So, if you show intent to make the pass and there's a draft marshal near you, make the pass. I mean, and if you can't, if it's not safe, then, they're not looking to penalize people who don't have intent to draft. So, on this particular course, it'll be Jimmy Riccatello, and he's one of the best Ironman has for marshaling. So I wouldn't worry about it. Just ride your own race, and you'll see people with bells on their bike for a reason on this course. It's not to be a wise ass. It's functional.
That's right. So ice on the aid stations, usually they do on the run. There was a race that I did this year where they didn't have ice for some reason on the run, but usually they do have it on the run. It's most likely in Chattanooga they had ice in cups. So if you're trying to grab ice from cups, if you're trying to grab ice, be mindful that it may be in the form of a cup with cubes of ice on it. Usually that ice doesn't taste very well, so if you try to drink it, it's not the best. Do you know if they're going to be having ice, or not sure?
I imagine they will. Yeah, I just don't know how they're going to distribute it. It'll be in Dixie cups.
Yeah. So chili in the AM, we have already answered that one. Yes, it can be below 60 in the AM, but I rode this morning and it was fairly comfortable at 6 a.m. So it's comfortable, but if you're the one that low body fat, maybe you probably want it. Bike routes, windy. I've also talked about that. It can be a little windy, but nothing like the beeline if you're doing the full distance later in November. Hoses. I don't know what type of heat management. How do I say? Like the question is if they're going to have hoses on the aid stations. I don't know exactly what Ironman has planned. I don't know if you know.
On the north side of the run course, probably, I don't know, maybe mile 4 and then mile 8. You run through a bunch of fountains, or you run like in between a bunch of fountains. It's almost like a splash.
Yeah, right.
So that's an opportunity to kind of just run over. If you're having a heat moment, you can just put your head over the cold water, and it's definitely wet.
So question is, splash and dash swim in the same lake? Yes, that's the only opportunity you have to swim at Timpetown Lake without getting kicked out. And recommendation for athletes that are using Sunday as a training day for the 70 point for the full distance in November. I'll just touch a few basic just because this depends. I mean, obviously, it depends on the athlete's goal. I'll touch a few bases. I think the courses are not the same. The temperature of the full is going to be much lower. The full tends to be a faster course. So recommendation is just make it a training day. Maybe taper a little less. Maybe just don't. If you want to test out your pace for the full, you can test out the pace, but it's different strategies at play, different course. There's really nothing similar other than you swim on the same lake and you run on the same paths. But it's the bike where most people would use as a good training day. It's going to be so different that I don't know if it's going to be useful in terms of you're on the same course. Can I take advantage of it? Maybe on the swim because you'll be able to sight, you'll be on the run, but the temperature, the course, everything is going to be different. So just make it a training day, gathered with aid stations. Jason.
Well, Scott's one of my coaches, so he's trying to make me work for this answer. Yeah, like Pedro said, it's tricky. It depends on whether or not they taper for it, how experienced they are, but it's a good opportunity to test race fueling, particularly how they handle fueling in the heat. Like Pedro said, it's going to be much cooler in November, but I think no matter what, it's going to be you want it to be a confidence-inspiring weekend. So do everything you can to just complete it and set yourself up to absorb the race and then keep building for the final push into the full. I wish the half were exactly half of the Ironman course, but for reasons out of our control, it's not. It never has been. So.
And speaking of, for those local, we'll do a live presentation about Ironman Arizona, similar to this one, but we'll do it at Moxie Multisport. So you're welcome to come in. If you're racing the full, you can come in. We'll probably do it Thursday or Wednesday. I'm not sure. Please check Moxie Multisport for confirmation of the date. We'll do a live presentation about this. If you want to come in and ask your questions, you're more welcome to. Moxie Multisport is always very welcoming to anyone from the outside of state. I'm sure they'll have some food and maybe some drinks. So feel free to come in. Run surface on this path. It's mostly a path, a sidewalk. So it's there's only a section of dirt. Which let me bring the run course right here. The section of dirt is where Jason is on the right by Jason, that out and back right there. Yeah, so you do have a section of dirt right there, and it's if I recall correctly, it's on the westbound because you go over a path and then down into dirt, and that's the only thing that everything else is, if I recall correctly, is paths, right, Jason?
Yeah, it's pavement. I feel like they're always doing construction down there, so you may have to hop up and down a couple curbs. But other than that, I would say it's mostly pavement. You don't need trail shoes for this. Definitely bring your road racing shoes.
Yeah, so we've also answered wetsuit legal. It may not be. I think I would say right now it's an 80% chance. Water temperature was 77 today. The cutoff is 76, so we still have a few days. Swimming to the sun, that's going to be definitely hard to sight. Sunscreen. Yes. Thank you, Kathleen. Sunscreen. Just use sunscreen. It creates it dehydrates you. It's injury to your skin. and it's very exposed bike and run course. So just put as much sunscreen as you can in the morning. If it wears out, put some before the run. It's always useful to have sunscreen. And I'll pass the ball to Jason in a minute. Just answering this one. Road or trail shoes, definitely roads. It's a very fast course, or it's a fast surface. It's not a fast course, but it's a fast surface. Jason, anything on sunscreen or trail shoes?
Just that it'll be like self-serve sunscreen. They'll probably just have like the mini travel size, where you can just put it on before, maybe even when you leave T2. They won't have sunscreen applicators as they did pre-COVID, but it's kind of nicer this way anyway.
Okay, I think we've answered most questions. Do you see any other question that I'm not seeing, Jason? I think that's pretty much it.
No.
Okay, I think we've answered most questions. If you have any further questions, please do comment on the video. Either myself or Jason will try to answer them. But I think you can rewind this and rewatch it for the future. But if there's nothing else Jason wants to add, we'll probably just see you on race day. Jason.
Yeah, I would just add that look, we're 7 days out, 8 days out. Let's just leave them with one last tip. And my last tip would be, you can't get any fitter at this point. So don't do any validation sessions for yourself to see how fit you are. This is the time to rest up and just sharpen up for race day this week.
Right. And if you have a coach, just listen to what he says. He probably knows it better than you.
Sometimes.
Okay. So Jason, logging off. Thank you everyone for watching. And have a great race. I guess that's it.
Yeah, we'll see you out there.